This is the Page Publishing Book Club. Good evening. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. Hello, Rob. Hello, March. Come in like a lion, come in like a lamb. Just get in here. I've had enough of winter. My Page Publishing Book Club faithful, we have eight first-time authors joining us tonight, so let's get to it. You want to be a teacher? Well, first you might want to read Matt Macaluso's book entitled Pull Your Head Out of Your Assumptions, What Teachers Don't Know About Teaching.
I'm a high school teacher. I teach in Summers, Connecticut, grades 9 through 12 at Summers High School.
What do you teach?
Well, I'm a history teacher. I teach U.S. history, world history, principles of law, trial law, psychology, philosophy. They're trying to kill me.
So what's your book about?
It's a series of interviews with 17 teachers from Massachusetts and Connecticut and New Jersey about their experiences teaching in the public school system. And the topics range from, why they became teachers to advice that they have for people coming into the business, to insights into students and parents and boards of ed and politics, ed reform, and all the stuff that's really killing us over the last 5 years or so.
Well, what is it that's killing you?
Where do I start? It's the ed reform that has really taken root the past 5-6 years, but has really been sort of in the works in the last 10 to 15 years. I'll give you an example. All professionals, right, we want goals and we want to be better. We're never really happy with our work. My professional goals went from 2 goals a year to 7. And in order to explain those goals, we got an 80-page manual on how to do our goals. Never mind teaching, never mind correcting, never mind assessing, never mind participating as a professional in my learning community. Now we're saddled with goals that came down from on high, mostly from people who either A, have no experience in education, or B, were teachers, but frankly don't have the chops to be a teacher, so they go and they work for state boards of ed and they dream up these fun things. The purpose of the book is to really focus somebody coming into the business and ask them, do you really want to do this? Are you okay with people being on the board of ed that have absolutely no experience in the classroom, in making decisions about policy and hiring and firing, and are you okay with the corporate, reform movement getting its tentacles into your classroom, into your curriculum? If you are, then that's what you're signing up for. I've been teaching since 1998, and up until really about 10 years or so ago, it used to be okay. But now the corporate reform movement is really awful. And the whole point of the book is to make sure, and don't get me wrong, I love teaching. I love my students when I can shut my door in my classroom and do what it is that I do best, not worry about, data and all of the things that sort of handcuff teachers. When I can do what I do best, I'm in my glory, and I love my school and I love my students. But it's really a gut check for people coming into the business and parents, for that matter, to understand what it is that that teachers are going through. Let me put it to you this way: you would never see policemen's unions or firemen's unions being put through the ringer the way teachers' unions are. Our own governor in the state of Connecticut kicked us in the teeth and said, all you need to do to be a teacher is show up to work for 4 years. So I'm asking people, do you want to be in this business with the way that it is now?
Our next author has a peace offering for the police and the people. It's the title of Tracy Bush's first book with Page Publishing. Tracy.
Okay, the book was basically designed to be able to bridge the gap between the police and the people understanding one another. I at one time had a little trouble in my life, and I dealt with, as a youth, incarceration as a teen, basically. And once I became an adult, I decided I would change the course of my life also, because I did not feel comfortable and it was not me. And so I got into the security field of becoming a security officer myself. And at that time, it gave me a lot of insight on how to reach out to certain individuals to be able to give them a better perspective of how they can conduct themselves when they're involved with police and there is some things that they need to discuss, or basically telling them, you understand that crime is not the answer, that you could change your life if you put certain principles together so that you will know that there's a positive way to go and there's not just a negative road that you have to follow.
So do you give examples?
Yeah, I give examples in the book, and I've also been working in the community as a community activist for the last, let's say 25 years or better. And during the last problems that we had been having in Cleveland, what I did was I also did a lot of promotion. I gave a lot of books away to help calm down the peoples and give them some information free so that they can not be violent towards the police, because the system has put something together for the police itself to help them understand how to better deal with civilians. But the book also is basically geared towards teaching the civilians how to better deal with the police in incidents and situations that they are confronted with. There's no basic knowledge out here that I have been privy of, except for a couple of things that give the people some insight so that they can redirect their attitude and how they feel about the police, because police are basically here to help and make society a better place. But a lot of individuals have attitudes towards thinking, because of a few of the negative individuals out here in the police force, that all of them are somewhat alike. And, of course, we know that that's not true.
Well, this is fueled by story after story about police brutality, police overreacting, police firing.
Yeah, well, you know what? We look at things and we go down through the generations of what has happened, with some of the police officers or some individuals, it basically is, I talk about putting peoples on a spiritual level of understanding things and how to develop the certain characteristics in your own moral fibers so that you can not escalate to a level where you want to be aggressive or combative with the police.
You got a great message there, Tracy, at just the right time. All right, next up, Teddy Smith wrote, Use Me Up, Prayer of Sacred Surrender.
It's about prayer. I am a reverend, and prayer is one of the main things that I do, but it's mostly about surrendered prayer. And the book really kind of is mostly used as a devotional to help folks find prayer and find what it means to pray more accessible. One of the problems that you may have is that you have only part of what I presented as a book project. You have the written part, but there is also an audio part of the book that actually is a recording of the actual prayer upon which the book is based. That it is a rote, R-O-T-E prayer. It's the prayer that I pray every day, and it is the prayer that really kind of explicates that part of the book that has that series of words. That's the devotional part that has that series of words, peace and surrender, peace, joy, worship. Those kind of words are in the prayer itself. But it's a prayer that is more a prayer of thanksgiving than anything else.
Well, you're a minister, so is that where you got the inspiration?
Well, long before I was a minister, the prayer more or less, as most of our prayers do, reflect our theology and our experience of God in our lives. So the prayer really came about long before my actual study of theology. So it was the prayer that reflects my life and my gratitude for those things that the Lord has allowed me to experience and to overcome as I became more and more cognizant of who God is in and for my life. Our theology, I believe, is what we pray. We pray to God in the ways that identify who we think God is. And so that's what this prayer basically is.
And how long have you been an ordained minister?
I've only been ordained really for a year, but I was licensed in 1999.
Are your church members using the book?
Yes. In fact, I now live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I moved to Milwaukee about a year ago, but I'm a member of a church here. I've been a member of a church here for 3 years. And I think the Lord speaks to all of us all the time. but we rely too much on our rational thinking and our own habits to not hear. We intentionally don't hear the voice of the Lord, much less obey it. And and that's what being surrendered in prayer is all about. Opening your spirit, opening your mind, opening your life to hearing from and being guided by that divine force that is always trying to guide us onto righteous paths.
Well, while we're on the subject of prayer, inspiration, and hearing God when he calls, meet Della Marie. She wrote Love is Good.
Love is Good is about a young single mother who made some mistakes, and she meets this handsome and charming, successful businessman who sweeps her off her feet. And she falls in love with him, and she, gets the perfect life from him. He gives her everything that she desires, this wonderful life, but she also gets something bad. He's very controlling. He's very abusive. He's very jealous. And she ends up suffering in this marriage, going through this cycle of abuse. And they end up having another child together, and the children end up suffering as well, going through this cycle of abuse. They stay together for about 10 years, and ultimately she's not happy going through, the cycle of abuse. And through her faith, she finds courage and strength to eventually leave David.
Do you have any connection to this story?
I do. I was married to an abusive man for 10 years, and I actually started writing the book when I was trying to leave my marriage. And writing the book for me gave me courage to eventually leave my marriage. It kind of gave me inner strength, to change my own life. Mary gave me strength to leave. So,
were you encouraged to write about what you were going through?
Yes, I was. This is a fiction novel, but some of the things Mary endured, I also endured. So I can write from experience, even though it is a fiction novel. I can relate to the character of Mary and what she suffered and who she was as a person as far as her character goes, and why she stayed and why she dealt with it the way that she did, and why it took so long for her to leave her marriage and that sort of thing.
Do you hope to give strength to other women in similar situations?
Yes, I do. I hope that it inspires other women in similar situations to find courage within themselves and break free from abusive relationships so they can have a better life for themselves and their children.
How do you find women who this book would really speak to?
Okay, when my book first came out on the market, a gentleman purchased a bunch of copies, and he said, but you have to promise me you have to go to the women's domestic violence shelter where I attended group therapy. And he said, you have to sign them and give them to the women for free. And so I did my first book signing at the women's shelter, and I signed all these copies of my book and gave them to the women at the domestic violence shelter and gave them all to them. He purchased all those copies of books and donated them. Isn't that sweet?
You have a guardian angel, you know that, right?
I do believe that.
All right, and my guardian angel, Rob the engineer, is telling me we got to take a quick break. Coming up, uprooting the root of all evil, and you know what I'm talking about. The amazing story of a woman in her 90s and mean old Murray the Mouse. Don't you go anywhere. This is the Page Publishing Book Club. We'll be right back.
Attention all authors. Page Publishing is looking for authors. Have you written a book and want to get it published? Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, Apple iTunes, and other outlets. They handle all aspects of the publishing process for you. Printing, cover art, publicity, copyright, and editing. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. That's 800-204-6099 for your free author submission kit.
Welcome back to the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. Rob Barretts is my engineer, and we are talking about uprooting the root of evil. That's the name of John Kasperson's book about how every decision we make is influenced by money or greed.
The color that influences transactions between human beings is not necessarily racial, black and white. It's green.
It's the effect that the economy has on it, and how the economy dispossesses much of the people who work, a 40-hour week and have nothing to show for it. We have a presidential candidate right now, Bernie Sanders, who refers to socialism, but those who oppose socialism do so because they talk about the redistribution of wealth from the rich to the poor. And the definition of socialism is from each according to his ability, to each according to their need. So, those who propose capitalism, they have no problem with income redistribution as long as it goes upward. And most people, when they think of socialism, justice of socialism is when redistribution of wealth goes to those who need it, not to those who don't. Right now we have a redistribution of wealth that goes up as opposed to down.
What is it that you're trying to accomplish?
If the book was written a couple of years ago when the Occupy movement was front and center, and there was just an article published, Forbes magazine indicated that the richest 62 people, and there were 53 men and 9 women, had the equivalent wealth of the bottom 3.5 billion people. So, if you have a tax structure, a social structure that penalizes wealth beyond imagination, more people can eat because in the world economy, there's only so much wealth. And when the laws are tipping the tables toward the wealthy who buy the politicians, that's what I'm trying to put a light on. Eventually, the money system will collapse because there are no precious metals, there are no disciplines to govern the value of currency. So we're going to have some sort of a plan B in effect when the money system collapses.
But John, you know what? There's got to be a will to change this.
I go into that, and I talk about the apathy. First of all, it takes an awareness, and if it's going to happen, it will resonate. It becomes a movement, it becomes a revolution. But it has to germinate. It has to get out there first. And I would certainly be a strong advocate, and then see where it goes. I mean, you have to light a candle, but better to light a candle than curse the darkness.
There you go. Our next author, Emma Ruth, asks a simple question in her book entitled, "Why Not Add Color?"
You want me to tell you about it?
Yeah.
It is a child's book, but it's good for the parents and adults, too. A lot of things that came up in my childhood. So I illustrate pictures to go along with the poetry and prose and tell a story about a childhood, like family, friends. And back in the day, we used to always dream because, things weren't accessible to us in that neighborhood of Buffalo, New York, where I came from. It's a book of prose, short stories, and poetry.
You're trying to introduce children to poetry.
Yes, and I have in my career, my teaching career, I'm retired now, but it lasted over 30 years. Well, I taught all grade levels. That's why the book is good for children and families to role play. In the introduction of the book, you'll see different phases of just plain life. Like I had twins coming up in my classrooms, and I used to be fascinated with twins. And there's a poem in there about twins and dogs. Like in Buffalo, we when I was young, dogs could, they would run around and without being on a leash. And I was so afraid of dogs. The back of the book, you'll see a poem. You'll see the illustrations of the dog chasing this little girl. And it's a funny book because you see the poop, like we used to step in. We used to always have to walk around poop. It's really funny. And throughout the book, you'll see like the animals that we had. My mom bought us a rabbit. And I used to really love to tell stories coming from my mother. So I would tell my classroom kids' stories and my personal kids' stories. And that's how it evolved. I had been working on it a long time. And in retirement, I decided to go forth with it.
Are you still in Buffalo?
No, I live in California for the last 40 years, but I taught school in Buffalo and in California.
Do you still have ties with the school that you taught at?
Some of my friends who are still teaching asked me to come over and read, and then I have something set up with the library.
That's great. So you'll be able to talk about your book and read your book to the kids that you hope will enjoy it most.
I sure will. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and they have taken the books to show and tell, and it seems like it's catching on, like it's really funny. And my love for art, I illustrate the funny pictures and tell a story through animated pictures and stuff like that.
So that's where the why not add color comes from.
Yes, it's a colorful life, really, but the book is in black and white, but it's over 200 pages.
I wish you a lot of luck with it. It sounds like a lot of fun for kids, Emma.
Sure is.
Savannah Bello is on the line. She wrote Savannah, Unexpected Turns. Hello, Savannah. You're what, 90 years old?
No, I'm 93.
You're 93.
Yes.
And this story is about your life.
Right.
What a life you've had. Who convinced you to write this book?
My baby daughter, and we were talking, and I told her something about my pregnancy with my oldest daughter. The agony I went through with her, and she said, why don't you write that down? I said, oh, no. And the more I thought about it, so that's where I started, which was the middle of my life. Really, it wasn't the beginning and it wasn't the ending. But
how many kids did you have?
2 girls and 1 boy.
Is your husband still alive?
No, that was a rough marriage.
What did you do? Like you said, you were working when World War II ended in Europe.
I was then a clerk working for the U.S. government in San Francisco. Periodically, I go by and look at that building today, 630 Stanton Street. The day the war was over, the job was over there. I worked at Naval Air Station in Alameda. I worked as a messenger, and I worked as a clerk. That's when I got pregnant with my oldest daughter there. The highlight that was in my life to me was when I was pregnant with my first daughter. Because I got pregnant the way I did, I met Jesus. And I was 8 months and some weeks pregnant. And I had gone through a hell of a lot of turmoil carrying her. The one thing I didn't believe I was pregnant, and then I had to admit that I was pregnant, that I lied about it in order to get off of my job because I was not married. If I had a child out of wedlock, I would be fired. It was such a disgrace. Therefore, I am African American. At that time, we were Negroes. I would never get another job. And I was working for the federal government. So that meant I had to get away from that job and not let them know I was pregnant. And maybe then I could get a job back working with the federal government, which was the best job that a Negro could get at that time, working for the federal government. In the state of California and most of America, we could not work anywhere. We could not live anywhere in the state of California, Washington, or whatever. You couldn't buy anywhere. So that's part of the stuff that pushed me to write the book.
And talk about just scratching the surface. By the way, this woman survived the Great Depression, World War II, a cheating husband, working for the government, TB, and had the pleasure of visiting the Clinton White House. Donald Bohrer has a lesson for kids in his book entitled Mean Old Murray the Mouse.
Yeah, I actually wrote it over 13 years ago.
What took you so long to get it published?
I didn't have the right pieces. Like constructing the book is it's just tons of missing pieces of a puzzle. Never had an illustrator was the main thing.
That's a good way to describe it. It is many pieces of a very complicated puzzle.
Yeah, it's about Murray the Mouse. He's mean to his family, so his father kicks him out of the house and forbids him to return home until he learns respect. Along Murray's journey, he takes advantage of the animals that are helping him until he needs help himself. At that time, when he needs help and he receives none, at that point he realizes the wrong that he's done to others, and he goes back and he makes things right with them.
What inspired this book?
My whole life I've loved kids, and just future generations, and life is full of lessons, and if I always wanted to do something to leave a legacy, and lessons out of life, you can tell everybody a lesson, but some of them might get it in, but the best way to learn a lesson is to actually live it and learn it.
Were these lessons you learned yourself?
Since I've been a younger teenager, I've always wrote poetry. Throughout my whole life, growing up with my father, we would always watch movies. My mom would read books when I was younger. And nowadays I love the news because everybody's like, why do you like the news so much? News is pretty much stories, except they're true stories. They're not always good stories. I think the inspiration was, I don't know. I think all my life, because I grew up watching movies and stories, and I've always been attracted to stories. Because actually writing this book, it started out one line at a time. Me and old Murray the Mouse lived inside a yellow brick house. And then it just went from there. The rhymes throughout the whole story. Moral of the story is treat others how you want to be treated. What goes around comes around.
Great. So 13 years later,
right,
you decided everything came together and you were able to get it published.
Well, I found the publishing company, and at that time I was married to my wife. She had my second child, and she helped me come up with the design, like the descriptions of each characters. Before that, I didn't even know what Murray looked like, and my wife sat down and actually worked with all the clothes they're wearing, what they look like, down to the color of their eyes, down to the scenery. It all came together. We actually sent in descriptions. Editing was a pain in the butt, and we had to get the story to where it just was perfect, where we had to make a few changes. And then step two was they drew them up, sent them in. Yeah, those look good. Approve that step. The next step was, what scene are they in? So then we came up with what's in the background of each scene, and the illustrator drew that up with the characters. Yeah, that looks good. So then it was next step, and then they stuck the words with the pictures. It was just step by step, and it came out fantastic.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, Donald. We try here at Page Publishing. We really do try to work with our authors to get the story right, match up the illustrations, and put out a book you can be proud of. So I'm glad to hear it all worked out for you. And there's no reason it can't work out for you, too, my Page Publishing Book Club faithful. Come back next week and you'll find another edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. Same time, same place, 710 WOR. Have a great weekend.